Thanks for watching. Today's story will take you from cruelty and humiliation to strength and justice. All inside a quiet diner. Comment where you're watching from. Rate the story out of 10. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful tales. Hey look, Freddy Krueger showed up for work, barked Morgan Harris, slamming his hand on the diner table, causing the cutlery to jump. Monster, bring us more coffee, he added with a sneer. But don't spill it with those crispy fingers. Laughter erupted from the group of smug executives around him. Their suits too tight from comfort and egos even tighter. Every Tuesday, they showed up at Sonny's diner like they owned the place. Eyes turned toward the waitress, Amber Lewis. She moved steadily across the room, a coffee pot in one hand. Her face calm. Her scars were visible from her fingertips, climbing partway up her arms before disappearing beneath the sleeves of her white uniform shirt. They were old, deep, and obvious. But Amber didn't flinch. She was 34, and she'd endured far worse than some mid-level managers making cruel jokes over their bacon and eggs. Bet it happened in some ghetto fire. Morgan's accountant, Lyle, whispered loud enough for Amber to hear. Maybe she was cooking meth and the kitchen blew. Morgan cackled. Or maybe it was her boyfriend. Lyle said with a shrug. You know how it is in that community. Amber approached their table with practiced poise. Her back was straight, her steps smooth. There was no trembling in her hands as she poured the coffee with clinical precision. Anything else, gentlemen? Her voice was steady, devoid of anger or shame. Morgan frowned. He'd expected her to be shaken. He thrived on it. Yeah, an explanation, he said, leaning forward with a smirk. How'd you get those? Accident or someone teach you a lesson? For a split second, Amber's eyes glinted with something unspoken, not fear, not shame. It was the look of someone who had seen death and said, "Not today." Work, she replied, then turned away. What kind of work leaves someone like that? Lyle pushed. Nightclub bouncer? Or was it prostitution? Careful, Amber said, turning to face him. One word, but the way she said it made the table go quiet. Some stories, she added, are more dangerous to tell than you can imagine. Morgan forced another laugh. It came out more hollow this time. Oh, the monster's trying to spook us. What are you gonna do? Burn us like you got burned? None of them noticed that Amber had been memorizing every face, every name, every little confession they'd made over the last 6 months, who they worked for, what companies they represented, what shady deals they bragged about. Her mind worked like a machine, storing everything. From a booth near the back, a man stirred in his seat. Jonah Reed, mid-40s, traveling cross-country, had just stopped in for coffee and peace. But the conversation unfolding across the diner made his stomach tighten. Something about the way Amber held herself caught his attention. Her calm, her control, her unshakable presence. It wasn't normal. Not unless you'd faced serious danger before. Amber wiped down a nearby table, muttering to herself like a mantra. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe. It was how she got through these shifts. One cruel comment at a time. Morgan wasn't done. I'm just saying, he continued, louder now. You serve coffee and wipe counters. That's not exactly high-risk work. Lyle snorted. Maybe she worked a grill and got splashed with grease. Or maybe she messed with the wrong cleaning chemicals. Amber paused. She wasn't cleaning now, she was standing still. Considering. People like me? She asked. Turning back, her voice hadn't changed, but there was a new sharpness in it. Morgan didn't back down. Yeah, you know, people who do manual work. Stuff that doesn't need too much thinking. Jonah watched closely now. He noticed the way Amber shifted her weight, distributing it evenly across her feet like someone preparing for action. And then he saw it. As she bent to pick up a fallen napkin, her sleeve shifted, revealing the edges of a faded tattoo. Just a fragment of ink, but to someone who had served. It was unmistakable. I said. Morgan pushed. What kind of work did you do? Amber stood up straight, eyes still on the napkin in her hand. Manual labor? She echoed. That's one way to describe dragging wounded soldiers out of enemy fire. Morgan blinked. What did you say? Nothing, she said, her voice returning to neutral. Do you want your check? Or are you planning to keep commenting on my face all day? Something about her tone threw Morgan off balance. Hey, you little, he started, rising to his feet. "You're gonna show us some respect," he shouted. "We're paying customers." Amber turned fully to face him, meeting his eyes directly for the first time. Morgan stopped mid-rant. Something in her gaze made him take an involuntary step back. Jonah leaned forward slightly in his booth. "An employee," Morgan finished, attempting to recover. "And employees should know their place." Amber tilted her head. "My place," she repeated slowly. "You're right, I should know it. The problem is, you have no idea what my real place is." Across the room, diners were frozen, forks in midair, drinks halfway to mouths. Even the kitchen had gone silent. Tony, the diner manager, appeared in the doorway and stopped short. He'd worked with Amber for years. She was always professional, always composed, always swallowing every insult. But something was different now. A storm was coming. Morgan wasn't backing down. "I bet you didn't even finish high school. Those scars? Probably from some street fight. People like you always find trouble." That's when Jonah saw the change. A flicker across Amber's eyes. It wasn't rage. It wasn't grief. It was resolve. The time for backing down is over, Jonah thought. Amber took a step toward Morgan. "Street fighting?" she asked, a bitter smile curling on her lips. "It's funny how you always assume the worst. Maybe these marks didn't come from crime. Maybe they came from something noble." "Noble?" Morgan barked, trying to laugh. "You work in a roadside diner. What's noble about your life?" Amber walked slowly up to his side. She leaned in just enough for him to hear her whisper. "The difference between you and me?" she said softly. "You judge people by what you see. I judge them by what they do when no one's watching." Morgan felt a chill creep down his neck. "You threatening me?" he snapped, but his voice cracked slightly. Amber straightened, speaking clearly. "Of course not. Just pointing out that some people underestimate the wrong person. And by the time they realize their mistake, it's already too late." Jonah leaned back in his seat, heart pounding. He knew that look, that tone, that posture. Amber wasn't just a waitress. She was something else entirely. He stood up and approached the counter. "Excuse me," he said gently as Amber passed by. "Can I speak with you a second?" Amber glanced at him, sizing him up. Veteran, probably army, respectful stance. "Make it quick," she said. "I've still got tables." "That tattoo on your arm," Jonah whispered. "1st Infantry Division. Big red one?" Amber froze. "You served?" she asked quietly. "Marines." Jonah nodded. 2 tours in Afghanistan. Amber looked him in the eye. "Combat trauma specialist. 3 tours in Iraq." Jonah nodded slowly. They have no idea who they're messing with. Amber allowed herself the smallest smile. "Not a clue," she said, "but it's not time yet." Morgan wasn't done. If anything, Amber's refusal to shrink made him double down. He pulled out his phone, turned on the camera, and stood up dramatically. "Hey everyone," he announced, raising his voice so the whole diner could hear. "Take a look at this. This is the monster who brings us our coffee every week. Get a close-up of those burns." Amber turned, locking eyes with the camera lens. But instead of embarrassment, there was a calm smile. Cold, calculated, the kind of smile that made Jonah's spine tighten. "Keep recording," she said evenly. "I'm sure you'll want to remember this moment." Morgan chuckled, clearly misinterpreting her tone. "See that? She even likes the attention. Probably has a whole fan base. Bet she runs some twisted OnlyFans account." Behind him, Lyle laughed a little too loud. The rest of the diner, though, had gone awkwardly silent. More people were watching now. Some discreetly filmed on their phones. Others exchanged uncomfortable glances. Jonah was no longer in his seat. He stood off to the side now, close enough to act if he needed to. His military instinct told him something important was about to happen. "You're right, Morgan," Amber said, slowly walking toward him. "I've been filmed quite a few times." Morgan grinned. "Oh yeah? Tell us all about it." "I've been filmed receiving medals," she said smoothly, "for pulling wounded soldiers out of burning vehicles, for keeping someone's heart beating until the medics arrived, for holding the line under enemy fire." Morgan's mouth twitched. He looked to Lyle for backup, but even Lyle looked uncertain now. "Sure," Morgan finally said, scoffing. "And I'm a Navy SEAL. Get over yourself. What kind of military hero ends up working in a greasy spoon diner?" Amber leaned in, lowering her voice. The kind who's smart enough to know that people like you only respect a uniform. But see, that's the problem. You think respect has to be earned. I think it should be a given. Jonah stepped closer, catching the attention of the diner manager, Tony, who lingered near the kitchen doorway. Tony, Amber called calmly, never taking her eyes off Morgan. Would you mind coming over here for a second? Tony hesitated, then stepped forward cautiously. We don't want trouble, he murmured. There won't be, Amber replied. I just need a witness. She turned to face the camera again. I want to make it clear, she said, speaking directly into the phone, that Mr. Morgan Harris of Harris Stratton & Company is filming this of his own free will. He's using my image, referring to my appearance, and is making statements meant to mock my physical scars. That correct, Morgan? Morgan blinked. What are you doing? Just establishing facts, Amber replied, in case this video ever gets shared outside your little circle. Morgan looked uneasy now. Lyle cleared his throat and started nervously stirring his coffee. Jonah stepped forward. Amber, he said gently, do you mind if we speak again? Just for a second? She glanced at him and nodded. He leaned in. You're building something, aren't you? She smiled faintly. Just gathering supplies. Morgan rolled his eyes. Oh, come off it. This little tough act doesn't scare me. You should be more worried about how your clients would react to this video. Amber replied, especially the ones you bragged about firing employees for not fitting your company's image. Morgan paled slightly. What did you just say? You talk loud when you're confident. She said simply, I've heard a lot of things over the past 6 months. Every Tuesday, right at this table. You're bluffing. Am I? Amber said, lifting her phone. Tony, can you bring me the other phone from behind the counter? The one I use for recording training videos? Tony gave her a startled look but did as she asked. A minute later, she held up the old phone. Texas law says only one party has to consent to being recorded. She said calmly, I've been recording every single shift for 6 months, including the things you've said. About people, about race, about shady clients. Morgan's face turned red. You can't prove anything. Amber tapped a button on the phone. A clear recording played out through the speakers. Morgan's voice rang through the diner. Just never write down that it's about race. You document other stuff, like lateness or attitude or culture fit. They can't prove anything that way. Lyle dropped his spoon. Morgan lunged toward the phone. But Jonah stepped between them. I wouldn't, he said. More phones were pointed now. More cameras recording. Customers who had once ignored the cruelty were now bearing witness. Morgan's phone buzzed violently. Caller ID. Michael Hastings, his biggest client. He answered quickly. Michael, look, it's not what it. Save it, came the sharp reply. I just saw a video of you mocking a war veteran's scars while bragging about firing minorities. You're going to explain this, now. Amber approached the table again. Smiling gently. Michael Hastings, right? The one Morgan helped clean up the company image last quarter? Morgan's jaw dropped. How do you? 3 months ago, you sat right here and told Lyle all about it. Retroactive performance reviews, documentation games, all of it. That's a lie. Morgan snapped. Amber raised a brow. Tony, can you get the manager's tablet? I saved the timestamp on that one. It's around 2:42 p.m. from April 9th. Jonah watched in awe as the color drained from Morgan's face. You posted the video, Morgan whispered. Amber nodded. I did, the one you filmed yourself. With the caption, corporate exec mocks decorated veteran. It's got a few thousand views already. Morgan scrambled to open Instagram. There it was, Amber's cold smile, his own voice taunting her. Thousands of comments pouring in. Veterans, activists, clients. My wife, Morgan muttered, reading one of the comments. She's going to. Amber held up her phone again. There's more, she said, flipping through folders. Details on your firm, off-the-books bonuses, confidential client lists, and everything you ever bragged about. Recorded word for word. Why didn't you say something sooner? Morgan asked, panic setting in. Why didn't you tell us who you were? Amber leaned in one final time, her voice steady as a blade. Because people like you need to learn that dignity shouldn't be earned through medals. It should be given freely. I let you talk, and now, I'll let the evidence do the talking. Jonah stepped forward and held out a hand. "Sergeant Amber Lewis," he said respectfully. "It's an honor." Amber took it with a nod, her calm demeanor unshaken. As Morgan and Lyle slinked out of the diner, pale and trembling, Amber turned to the remaining customers. "What about the rest of you?" she asked. "How many times have you watched this happen and said nothing?" There was a hush. Then slowly, quietly, someone began to clap, and then another, and another. By the time Amber returned to the counter, the diner had erupted, not in laughter or insults, but in applause. By the end of that unforgettable Tuesday, Amber Lewis wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was a storm, and everyone who had ever underestimated her was starting to feel the wind shift. Morgan Harris fled the diner red-faced, clutching his phone, trying to do damage control with clients who were already pulling away. Lyle trailed behind, avoiding eye contact with anyone. But it was too late. The video Morgan proudly recorded had spread online like wildfire. Jonah stayed behind, helping Amber clean up, though she hadn't asked. She moved with the same steady rhythm as always, wiping tables, refilling sugar canisters, as if she hadn't just brought down a corporate predator with surgical precision. "You know," Jonah said quietly, "I served under a major in Fallujah who planned a major extraction while cleaning a rifle. That's what you remind me of right now." Amber smirked, keeping her eyes on her work. "A soldier's got to stay useful." Tony, the diner manager, walked out of the kitchen with an unreadable expression. He held a large envelope in his hand and approached Amber slowly. I've been holding on to this," he said awkwardly, extending it toward her. "It's from the state. Came a few weeks ago. I didn't know if I should give it to you. I guess I didn't want to remind you of things you might want to forget." Amber took it gently, her face unreadable. She opened it and unfolded a letter printed on official state letterhead. Jonah watched her eyes scan the text, saw the flicker of emotion she didn't allow to surface often. "VA verification," she said softly. "They finally approved my claim." Tony looked sheepish. "I didn't mean to keep it from you. I just thought." "It's okay," she interrupted gently. "You were trying to protect me." He exhaled in relief. "Yeah, but looks like you don't need protection." Amber's phone buzzed again. She checked the screen and raised her eyebrows. "It started," she said, holding the phone so Jonah and Tony could see the notifications roll in. Dozens of messages from reporters, advocacy groups, veteran organizations, and, most interestingly, corporate HR directors. One stood out. Subject: Speaking engagement opportunity, veterans and workplace equity. From HR Director, Denim Logistics. "Is that the same Denim that dropped Harris Stratton as their consultant?" Jonah asked. Amber nodded. "Guess they're trying to clean house. Or clean image." Tony looked around the diner, still trying to understand how his calmest employee had just become a national name overnight. "I should update the staff board," he said with a half laugh. "You know, add decorated veteran under your name tag." Amber smiled. "Make it assistant manager. It's time we started setting new standards." That night, while most of the town slept, Amber stayed up late. She sat at her kitchen table with her laptop open, the folder of recordings beside her. Jonah had offered to help her organize everything: dates, names, timestamps, but she insisted on doing the groundwork herself. Each recording was a tile in a mosaic. Each smug remark from Morgan or his colleagues was a brushstroke painting a larger picture of systemic injustice disguised as business strategy. She didn't just want revenge. She wanted to expose the system that enabled people like Morgan to thrive for so long. By morning, she'd uploaded a detailed complaint, complete with audio files, transcriptions, and corroborating evidence, to the Department of Labor, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and 3 major civil rights law firms. And she didn't stop there. Her phone buzzed again, this time from a podcast producer. "We'd love to interview you. Your story's inspiring. When can we talk?" She glanced at her calendar. Already, 3 speaking engagements had been confirmed. A local university wanted her to guest lecture on workplace ethics. A veteran outreach center wanted to highlight her story in a national campaign. Jonah messaged her too. "Let me know when you want help setting up that nonprofit. I'm ready when you are." It had barely been 48 hours, and already Amber's life was changing at a pace she could barely keep up with. But one thing she hadn't changed was showing up for her shift at the diner. When she walked in Wednesday morning, customers looked up and clapped quietly. The same faces that once ignored the weekly humiliation now stood to greet her. A few apologized, some cried. An elderly woman at the corner booth placed a small American flag on the table next to her coffee. "You're our hometown hero," she whispered as Amber poured her refill. "Thank you for your service, on and off the battlefield." Amber nodded, too humbled to speak. Then, mid-morning, the diner doors opened, and in walked Morgan Harris. His face was pale, dark circles under his eyes, and the crisp arrogance in his posture was long gone. He approached the counter, but Amber didn't flinch. She greeted him as she would any customer. "Coffee?" He nodded. She poured. He accepted it with shaking hands. "I came to say sorry," he began, voice cracking. I didn't realize who you were." Amber leaned on the counter, steady gaze locked onto his. "That's the problem," she said. "You treated me like garbage because you didn't know. As if decency depends on someone's resume." Morgan swallowed hard. "I lost everything. My clients, my firm. My wife saw the video. She left, took the kids. He trailed off, not knowing how to finish. "I didn't do that to you," Amber said gently. "You did it to yourself." He looked like he wanted to argue, but instead, he just nodded. "Is there any way I can make this right?" Amber didn't blink. "No, but you can learn from it, and maybe teach someone else not to make the same mistake." He nodded again, then turned to leave. At the door, he stopped and looked back. "You really were in the army?" "3 tours in Iraq," she said simply. "Guess I never stood a chance." He muttered. "Fought the wrong kind of soldier." She watched him go, not with hatred, but with a kind of quiet finality. He wasn't her enemy anymore. He was just another example. Later that afternoon, Amber sat with Jonah on the diner's back patio. "I've been thinking," she said, "we don't just need to punish people like Morgan. We need to support people like me, vets trying to rebuild. Employees surviving hostile workplaces, people who don't wear armor anymore but still walk into battle every day." Jonah leaned forward. "You've got my full support." Amber tapped her phone screen and showed him the draft of a new website, the Lewis Project. A nonprofit built to support veterans transitioning into civilian jobs, advocate for workplace fairness, and hold employers accountable. "That's what we're doing next," she said, "and this time, no one gets to ignore us." Jonah smiled. "You're not just rewriting your story, Amber. You're writing a new chapter for a whole lot of people." She smiled, the scars on her face catching the golden light of the afternoon sun. And she knew he was right. 6 months after that unforgettable morning at Rayburn's diner, the world had changed, not just for Amber Lewis, but for thousands of others who had once felt invisible. Her story had spread far beyond their small Texas town. The viral video of Morgan Harris belittling her, followed by her calm, devastating takedown, had become a national talking point. It had sparked heated debates on cable news, inspired op-eds in major newspapers, and even reached Capitol Hill. Amber didn't seek the spotlight, but it found her anyway. One Thursday morning, a convoy of motorcycles rumbled into town. Veterans from every branch, many who had never met her, had come from across the country just to shake her hand. Tony, ever the quick thinker, turned the back wall of the diner into a wall of valor, filled with photos of local veterans and service members. At the center was Amber's photo, one taken during her final deployment. Her arm slung over a wounded soldier, eyes locked on the medevac helicopter in the background. Kids from the local high school took field trips to the diner now. Teachers spoke of Amber's courage in classrooms. Podcasts, documentaries, and even a feature story on national TV had brought her quiet resistance and tactical brilliance into the homes of millions. She hadn't asked for fame, but she used it. Through the Lewis Project, Amber helped pass new legislation in 3 states to protect veterans and marginalized workers from discrimination. The nonprofit provided legal resources, job placement programs, and emotional support networks for those stuck in toxic work environments. Jonah, now her business partner and co-founder, ran workshops across the state. His consulting work with companies looking to improve their hiring and equity practices had exploded in popularity. And as for Amber, she divided her time between the diner, public speaking, and the nonprofit. She never stopped showing up at Rayburn's, apron tied around her waist, pouring coffee like she always had. Because to her, staying grounded was part of the mission. "I want people to know that the work matters even when no one's watching," she told a local news anchor during an interview. Especially then, not everyone had fared so well. Morgan Harris, once the arrogant face of Harris Stratton Group, was now a cautionary tale in business seminars. His firm collapsed within weeks of the scandal. The EEOC investigation sparked by Amber's recordings uncovered layers of discriminatory practices spanning more than a dozen client companies. Morgan lost his professional licenses. His wife divorced him. He moved out of state, trying to piece together what was left of his life. He called once. Months later, "Amber," he said quietly, I was wrong about everything. If I ever have a chance to make this right." "You already did," Amber interrupted, her tone even. "You gave me the platform." She hung up, not out of anger, but because the conversation was over. His chapter had ended. Hers had just begun. Lyle Jennings, the meek accountant who had once laughed along with Morgan, was now stocking shelves at a local grocery store. Every time someone recognized him from the viral video, he flinched. He avoided eye contact, never wore name tags, and lived in quiet regret. Some said he was trying to rebuild his life. Amber hoped he was. The biggest shift, though, came from within the community. People who once sat in silence at the diner, watching humiliation unfold but doing nothing, had started speaking up. Conversations changed. Customers began greeting Amber with respect, asking about her work, thanking her for what she'd endured, and what she'd built. One afternoon, the old woman who always sat in the corner booth handed Amber a small envelope. Inside was a handwritten note. "I watched you suffer in silence and said nothing. I'll never forgive myself, but I promise to never be silent again. Thank you for being braver than all of us." Amber kept it in her wallet. It reminded her that sometimes, justice didn't roar. Sometimes, it whispered, quiet, patient, precise. One late night at the diner, Jonah sat across from her in their usual booth. They'd just finished a 2-day conference on workplace reform and had driven straight back to town. "I still can't believe it," he said, sipping lukewarm coffee. 6 months ago, I was a drifter on a cross-country trip. Now we've testified before Congress." Amber chuckled, leaning back in her seat. "I was just trying to get through a Tuesday without someone calling me a monster." Jonah looked around the diner. Photos on the wall. Customers talking about fairness and respect like they were everyday ideas now. "You built something bigger than justice," he said. "You built change." Amber stared out the window for a moment. The neon sign buzzed softly. The streetlights lit the empty lot where Harris used to park his BMW. Then, she nodded. "Justice is great," she said, "but change? That's the real legacy." And it was. Because of Amber Lewis, more companies started reviewing their hiring practices. Because of her, more veterans were hired, respected, and protected. Because of her, laws change, conversations change, people change. She didn't do it with anger. She did it with focus, strategy, dignity, and with scars, visible and invisible, that told a story of pain, survival, and victory. In her final public speech of the year, standing before a packed auditorium of HR leaders, veterans, and workers from across the country, Amber stepped up to the podium and took a deep breath. "I'm not a hero because I wore a uniform," she said. "I'm not even a hero because I took down a man who tried to humiliate me. I'm just someone who refused to let others define my worth." She let the silence settle. "Respect," she continued, "shouldn't be earned through medals, job titles, or skin color. It should be automatic, basic, human. And if we're going to build a better world, it starts right there, in how we treat the people we think no one's watching." The audience rose to their feet. Amber smiled, her scars catching the light like medals. She didn't just survive injustice. She transformed it. The end. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, and subscribe to Tell Night. At Tell Night, stories remind us that healing begins with hope, and even the gentlest kindness can rewrite a destiny. Don't forget to tap the bell so you never miss a story that could brighten your day or transform your perspective. Until our next story, keep your heart open and your spirit brave.